All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, we've all heard about the Tyre Nichols situation. It was truly a tragedy. Was it wrong? Of course. Was it racist? I'm going to double down and say no, it wasn't. This woman here, though, happens to think that it was, and she's going to explain that for us right now. Take a look.
Agree. What's it got to do with racism and white supremacy?
So people
Why are white people responsible for this?
Okay, so people could also argue that this is due to internalized racism, which is a byproduct of societal or institutional racism, also referred to as white supremacy.
So black police officers become white supremacist racists who kill black people because they work in an atmosphere of white supremacy. Is that it?
I can explain it a little bit better. Okay, so anti-blackness is baked into society here and in the US, and black people are not impervious to that. And so what people fail to realise...
So black people are anti-black?
Yep, exactly. So let me explain it. I know it's very confusing. Nonsense. So let me explain it. Let me explain it, Piers. So what people fail to realise is that when black people have to contend with racism, they can end up internalising it. And that can result in low self-esteem, self-loathing, and rejection of one's community. And when you combine those feelings, which, as we know, are also referred to as unconscious bias, when you have those feelings and they are compounded by hierarchy and power, it can lead to an individual abusing said power and projecting their self-hate onto another. And this is why, in my opinion, why we see black and white police officers killing more black people than we do white. Reason why is because of racism, which includes internalized racism, Piers.
Right. I think that's complete nonsense.
You would,
If I was from the UK, I would have to say that's a bunch of bollocks. Now, I think it's too early to be making any assumptions as to why this happened. You know, racism is the first thing people like this lady can grab to. But, you know, I've heard that Tyre Nichols actually knew one or multiple of those cops involved. You know, I've heard rumors and I've heard things that I don't even want to tout or throw out there to be true, but I think we need to let this boil a little bit more and have more information come out before we just say that this is internalized racism. It doesn't make any sense. So am I a racist because I'm a conservative? Does that automatically make me a racist? People will go so far as to, you know, judge you and judge your life. Just on the last video I did about Tyre Nichols, about what Whoopi Goldberg said on The View. You know, I got people in the comments telling me that I don't like my people and I'm selling out on black people for a check. I mean, yo, like, I have an African girlfriend. Most of my friends are black, like, and they all know that I think this way, but I love them and they love me. It doesn't affect our relationship, you know? So to go so far as to say something like that is ridiculous, but you know, it really does seem like if you're black and you don't agree with the liberal way of black thinking, you aren't black. You have to be a black liberal to be black. And I think that's a bunch of BS, man. But let's continue.
You're a white man and you don't understand.
Exactly. I'm white. Therefore, my skin color means I have...
Because you don't have the lived experience.
My skin color means I have nothing to do with it. All right, well, let me go to a black man and see if he's allowed to have a view. Zuby, what's your view?
Okay, so I agree with the first half of everything that was said there. I agree that the video was disgusting. I agree that this is an issue of training, and I agree that this is an issue of the human heart. I think that any attempt to put the blame on this in any way, shape, or form on racism or white supremacy or white people in general is absolutely ridiculous. I also think it's pretty degrading because this sort of idea stems from the notion that black people, black men, black women, that we do not have full agency and responsibility and therefore accountability for our actions and our words. We end up in these ridiculous situations where no matter the permutation, no matter what happens, even if there's not a single white person involved in the situation, in the Memphis police force, even the police chief is a black woman. The large percentage of the force is black, and people are still trying to lean on this white supremacy is the answer and the reason for everything. And honestly, it's lame. And as someone who's lived my entire life as a black male, certainly I've never been possessed by this sort of phantom of white supremacy that's made me want to attack anybody, let alone another black person. And I think that we need to put the blame and responsibility squarely on the individuals who were involved in this.
I completely agree.
It's tragic that this young man died.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I love that answer. Shout out to Zuby, because it just doesn't make sense. I don't even think this situation has anything with these has anything to do with these men being self-loathing black men who hate their skin or hate their color. I don't think it's anything about that. I mean, okay, so tell me this, black on black crime is running rampant in inner cities. Black on black crime has been, a very prevalent thing for years and years and years now. Is that internalized racism? No, it's just a problem of the heart. It's a problem of their upbringing. It's a problem of not knowing right and wrong is. What does racism have to do with this? And this is how I know, seriously, that racism is an industry. Race hustling is an industry. These people get paid and they get praised for, trying to teach white people and teach others about what racism is and explain all these fancy words and fancy terms, but they're just speaking nonsense. This has nothing to do with racism at all.
I mean, just to note some statistics about the Memphis Police Department, that 65% of Memphis population is black. 58% of the entire police force in Memphis is black. The police chief was a black woman, right? And so on and so on. So you take all that in totality, you think, well, okay, well, where is this institutionalized white supremacy coming from, given the institution is actually served predominantly by black people for a population that is predominantly black as well? So I don't get that point. The second point I make is this. I think there's a wider issue here. The demonization of the police in America, calling them all a bunch of vile racists, has led to many older, experienced, good police officers who are not vile racists quitting the force all over the country. And as a result, in Memphis, for example, they had a massive reduction, 20% between 2011 and 2017 of police officers. 20% went from the force. And so to try and restore the numbers, they made it easier to become a police officer. They reduced the restrictions, reduced the qualifications. 2 of the 5 officers involved in killing this poor young man went through that process in that period of not being required to have the same sort of qualifications that they used to join the Memphis Police Department. So you have a bunch of people being brought in who are poorly trained, who are not qualified to do the job, who end up committing this kind of crime. That has nothing to do with racism or white supremacy. That has everything to do, I think, with perhaps an over-demonized force in general, with a lot of bad apples in it, but over-demonized force leading to many people quitting and being replaced with people just not up to the job.
I think everything that you said, I don't disagree with. I think it's not about conflating the two things. It's just about presenting a different perspective, an alternative perspective that should be considered, because internal racism is a real thing, so therefore it should be considered.
You just heard a black man, in a very considered way, say that basically you're talking nonsense. The idea that you
I'll ask that. So Zubi, do you believe that internal racism is nonsense? Do you believe that black people cannot internalize racism? Do you believe that?
I don't believe that it's completely impossible.
Okay.
I don't think it's impossible for I don't think it's impossible for a person of any race or ethnicity to harbor hatred or animosity towards people who may look like them or share some things in common. What I completely disagree with is the idea that in every single one of these situations, that no matter what happens, we just jump to white supremacy is the problem. We've seen this happen many, many times.
And I agree with you.
And I think one of the biggest issues with it is, I think one of the biggest issues as well is it's actually a distraction from a very important conversation, which Piers was leaning into there, which is that when it comes to the police in the USA and also in other countries, there's clearly an issue of character, qualifications,
and prejudice.
Training. I don't know exactly. Yeah, and
prejudice is the foundation for all forms of discrimination, including sexism, misogyny, racism, and the list goes on. So if you have not dealt with your prejudice within an institution, it will manifest in racism. That's a fact.
You're talking over.
That's a fact.
I'm making a good point. But secondly, you're bringing in prejudice, bigotry, racism, none of which had anything to do with this particular incident.
Exactly. So she just went all the way off the rails, bringing up all that other stuff, but she can't say that she agrees with what they're saying and then also provide her alternate perspective, because our alternate perspective just doesn't make sense. What Piers is saying and what Zubi is saying makes perfect sense. You demonize the police force. Over 20% of the police force leaves. Now you got all these diversity hires and just, tag along hires. Oh, you be a police officer. You be a police officer. You be a police officer. So, of course, when these police officers have altercations and they have to deal with other people, the chances are higher that they're just not prepared and that they should not be police officers in the first place. You know, had the rhetoric around policing been different, maybe this would have been different. Maybe this squad, this Scorpion squad, wouldn't have been the ones who would have had to respond to that call. But unfortunately, they were. But that's a discussion that, you know, people like this lady don't even want to have. How do we not want to have the discussion that, you know, getting rid of 20% of the police force and bringing on a bunch of other knuckleheads had nothing to do with this? Come on, man.
What are you talking about? I just explained to you internal racism, which is based off of prejudice.
It had nothing to do with why these
And I said it should be
killed this
considered.
man.
I said it should be considered.
Well, let Zuby finish the point you were making.
Okay. Okay. Even following on from that point, I'd also say this is mind reading as well. So even trying to bring racism into this conversation, let's say these guys did not have guns and badges. Let's say this was just a group of random thugs, 5 black men beating up another black man. Even in that situation, even outside the police force, I've still seen situations where people try to blame this somehow on this specter of white supremacy. And as I've said, frankly, it's embarrassing.
And
as a black person, I have just as much agency and accountability. Okay. As I said, black people have full responsibility and accountability, just like it would be ridiculous to see a video of white people beating up a white man. There are videos out there of white police beating up white people.
Well, I would also make the point.
Have you seen loads of videos of
I would also, look, if I could
just, on
that point, I would also make the point that if people genuinely believed it was racism, then given these scenes were as horrific as the George Floyd killing, in my view, no better, no worse. I mean, this went on for a much longer period and was disgusting and abhorrent to watch. Completely innocent guy just getting beaten and then he died. Given that, if it was racism that people genuinely believe was the motivation, we would see the same scenes on the streets of cities all over America that we saw after George Floyd's death. We would see the riots. We would see burning cities. We would see that kind of intensity of reaction. But the truth is, even the people claiming this is about racism and white supremacy, they don't believe it. Because if they did believe that, they'd be out on the streets saying it. And they're not.
And see, guys, this is the problem with this rhetoric and way of thinking. We've completely watered down what racism even means now to the point where 5 black officers beating up a black man is racism. How is that racism? You know, like Morgan Freeman said, if we stop talking about it so much, it wouldn't be so prevalent. If we stop talking about it so much, we would actually know what it is when we see it. But because we've built an entire institution, profession of, anti-racism and all this stuff, people will pick at the racism straws whenever they get a chance to. And we seeing it right here.
They are saying it because they do believe it.
But they're not protesting in the same way because in their heart they know it's not racism.
So I agree with you in that. I've always said that. I don't subscribe to any type of hypocrisy, right? So if white people are going to kill black people, we should be outraged. If black people kill black people, we should be outraged. So therefore, there are many things that Zuby have said that I agree with. There are many things that you have said that I agree with. But what I'm also trying to say is that firstly, this is about abuse of power and a disregard of life. Those individuals should make sure that they are accountable.
Well, we can all agree on that.
That is clear. But we also need to take into account that black people internalize racism and they can perpetuate that racism within institutions. That is a fact.
Yeah. I'll tell you what is a fact. This was 5 black police officers killing a black man, not because of racism and white supremacy or because anything a white person had done. But because they actually didn't know how to do their jobs. It got completely out of control. They behaved like a mob, a frenzied mob.
Just like
and they completely lost control.
Because they're thugs as well. When white police beat up black people, they're also thugs as well. Because black people aren't just thugs when they beat up black people.
Yeah, I didn't say...
white people can also be perceived as thugs when they beat up black people. Just be clear on your language.
You can keep saying whatever you want. This had nothing to do with racism or white supremacy. And as Zuby rightly says, I actually think it's embarrassing. You called them black thugs,
though, didn't you?
They were black thugs.
Okay, but you don't call white people black thugs when they kill black people.
Can I say one more thing here, Piers?
I call white people I call white thugs white thugs.
You don't.
Of course I do.
There is far more emphasis on black people.
There
is far more emphasis. This is the reality of media. There is far more emphasis.
Can I jump in here?
Final word to Zuby.
Connotations like thugs.
Final word to Zuby.
Yeah, can I jump in here? I think that in both the US and in the UK, When we can have these conversations without the words white and black even being brought into the picture, then I think we'll be making some good headway.
So you're offering colourblind, which is irrational.
I totally agree. And actually,
colourblind is
I actually completely agree with that.
And I'm quite disappointed that you said that as a black man.
If we purely talked about the police brutality here in that context without mentioning skin colour,
we won't get anywhere.
We would actually get somewhere to trying to help the situation. But by making it about race where it doesn't exist, we actually cause more problems than we're already there. Iman, thank you. Zuby, appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, guys, the internalized racism thing, we don't even know the reason why this happened yet. We know that it's terrible. We know that it's wrong, but we don't know the reason. We don't know the motive behind why they did what they did. We don't know if they were completely just on a power trip. We don't know if it was any sort of beef that they had with each other. We don't know. So before we start making internalized racism claims, how about we at least get the facts first? All right, but that's it for the video, you guys. Let me know what you thought about this in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe on your way out the door. Until next time, I'm out of here, you guys. Peace.